Okay, welcome everybody. What's up? Make some noise.
Hi, hi, hi.
Yay!
Look alive, look alive. This is the first Make Games digital talk that we've done with cameras, so it's nice to see everyone. If you don't know, first of all, the reason I'm talking in English is because we're hosting Mr. Frederik Gareau. How do I pronounce your last name?
That's it. You got it. It's as close as
Close
I
enough.
expected. Yeah.
Who's graced us all the way from, I believe you're in Canada, not that it matters.
It's Montreal.
Montreal, yep. This is part, you've all come here from the Discord. That's the only place this link was posted. If you're new to the Discord, welcome. It's a game makers group from Jerusalem called MakeGamesJLM, and we've moved to Discord since all being at home. We meet every Monday for a talk, and we call it like a make and play event. So it's an organized event where everyone's kind of working either on their own thing or together, but you can get the support from other people around you, feeling like you're working together. We used to do these in person, and we will in the future, but for now this is good enough, and everyone's welcome. So after this talk, we're going to go back to the Discord and do a little show and tell, talking about what people are working on, and that way you can meet other people from the community and hear what they're doing and find interesting people to talk to. Next week during the... You can't hear me? How about now?
No.
You're good.
Just gonna not use the push to talk. Okay. Next week, we're not having a talk, we're doing a game club. Everyone is playing a game called A Short Hike, which was voted a few weeks ago, and we'll discuss it next week together. And then we'll choose another game. So that's the way it works. This Zoom conversation is hosted by Samsung Next with great generosity from them. They're here to help us, help startups and help entrepreneurs and people through this time. I won't deliver it as well as Abigail here will, so I'll let her say a few words about Samsung Next. And thanks to them for supporting our initiative.
Okay, thank you, Amir. It was really hard to hear you. I think something's wrong with your microphone, and I have my kid here playing with the electricity, so I'll be short. Samsung Next is an innovation arm of Samsung focusing on software and services. We do both investments in early stage startups, and we build products in-house. So if there are people here that any of these things could be relevant for, I'm more than happy to provide more details. Amir, you have my email, so you can send my email, and thank you everyone for participating, and for Amir for organizing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I'll give it to Fred and take it away.
Thanks, Amir. Thanks, guys, for being here. So yeah, I'm Fred. I'm in a server or online usually called Fred Tuna. Real name is Frederik Gareau. I'm a software developer, programmer from Montreal, Canada. I'm currently working on a game called Airborne Kingdom. My studio is called The Wandering Van, if you guys want to check that out. So currently working on in a fully remote indie team in North America. So we're 4, 5, 6 people, depending on the days, working on this game. And Amir asked me to give a talk here about my path to this, to making this game and starting the studio here in fully remote. Since I started making games probably almost 10 years ago as an intern, and started my game dev career, I guess, as a developer on AAA games. I know that's that's the type of experience that's kind of hard to get in Israel. And I hope to maybe share a little bit of what I've learned through it and how that has helped me to get here at this time, working on what I'm working on now. So just as a quick kind of story or background as to how it all started, I'm a computer engineer. I studied computer engineering, did computer programming, did a lot of internships, and then eventually kind of got interested in doing video games, and did a few internships at Electronic Arts. All of my work prior to this has been with Electronic Arts on and off, working on AAA games such as Battlefield Hardline, Battlefield 3, Battlefront 2, and other games that did not necessarily come out. So yeah, like, again, just the beginning of the story, I worked in Montreal as an intern, and I worked at Visceral in California for several years as a gameplay developer, gameplay programmer. I then, that's where I kind of met a lot of people that I ended up working with. So just to start with, maybe like in my experience working in AAA, working in Battlefield Hardline, I would say was the time where I really started working not as an intern, full-time dev, having all the exposure that I needed to get to the point where I'm at now. The things that I learned the most at that time, and that prepared me to be where I'm at now, are things that I would say are not necessarily don't necessarily just come from working in AAA, but I'd say just come from working in games, whether it's indie, whether it's like your own little projects. I think it's important to kind of go through that phase to the part of the game dev career to get the experience, right? So just to get stuff, to know stuff, to get ready to be maybe in a position where like you start your own studio, you go full indie without necessarily the same amount of support. So for example, the biggest thing that we do in AAA that's really important, that takes a lot of place, is the planning, right? Like the estimating of tasks, and it can be pretty heavy at times because you have people that's their only roles, and a lot of people that is their only roles, and the reason is it's very important, and that's something that maybe in school or something I did not necessarily, you're being told like planning and estimating tasks and doing the whole, using the software for it is important, but then until you see the impact of it has on making a game such as Battlefield Hardline, where at the highest peak maybe has like 300, 400 people across several studios working on it, you realize that it's just really an essential part of it, right? So that's where I learned, I'd say, one of the most important things is to estimate tasks properly. And that usually means way overestimating how long you think it's going to take, and taking the time to at least at the very beginning do a high-level estimation of how long things are going to take. I'd say this is one thing that helped us a lot to find financing for our game in studio. It gives a lot of credibility, and like the one thing with indie is it's such a saturated market. There's so many games coming out, so many people wanting to do it, that for people that are in position to give financing, the ideas are not necessarily worth as much as the ability to execute, right? Like they need to know that it's a good idea, sure, but the team behind it will be able to execute and bring it to fruition because they're putting the money on the line. So the one thing to look at is like how well did you plan your things? How are they estimated? Obviously, if you have prior experience shipping games or working on games, they will look at this as like, hey, they kind of know what they're getting into. They're not just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that it sticks. Sorry. So yeah, the importance of it. You know, like we're towards the end of our project here on our Airborne Kingdom, and in the middle of it, you start thinking like, oh my God, we're never going to hit it. We're never going to do what we planned. And the reason that it seems like now we're actually going to hit it is because at some point you realize that we added a lot of buffer time. You know, you overestimate tasks, you add tasks that maybe might, you know, you add buffer at the end, and you plan for a much shorter amount of time, knowing that it takes longer. And it seems like now it works because we're hitting that place where like, oh, all of a sudden we don't have more tasks. We just have this buffer space that we allow ourselves to work with. So that's, I would say, one of the most important things that I have learned. That's kind of more on the game dev side, less than the technical side as a programmer, right? On the more technical side, obviously, I worked with very, you know, very talented engineers, programmers that, you know, they had to be the base for a huge team, right? Like when you work on a game, oftentimes it all comes down to like, hey, please make this work at the end of it. You know, like, please, engineers, make sure this works without bugs, make sure that you get to the end of it. And to see that as a more junior engineer was really, you know, like you learn a lot of the details. It's stuff that it's hard for me to even, you know, like explain, or or in school or wherever, like to kind of to learn on a more theoretical level. It's more like just living through it, right? And again, I see the same thing now in a team of 5, 6 in a small indie studio. This same type of thing, and then it's possible to learn it, but it's just, you need to go through the experience of shipping a game, and then, you know, seeing like all the being surrounded by people that maybe have that experience and absorb it from them, right? Absorb that stuff. More specifically, like examples would be maybe like the high level structure of a game. It's a whole other beast than like, hey, here's you know, a very specific example of a problem to solve, a programming problem, right, to solve, and to scale that all the way up to just build a whole game that kind of works together and that is somewhat modular, so you can it's not like a whole monster of code where like you can't take pieces out and reuse later. And if there's a bug here, everything gets defined. To be able to structure this whole thing, it's quite daunting of a challenge, right? And that's something that I kind of saw the senior engineers at Visceral, at EA in general, just kind of handle. And I see myself now as the main engineer on this game. That's my responsibility now to be able to apply that knowledge and put it in, right? So that's another thing that, like, again, just kind of going through maybe projects that might not be your ideal project, that you're like, this is my dream project, right? It's important to maybe have to go through phases, because I would say, you know, like, I had a lot of fun working on these AAA games, but at some point you're like, hey, maybe I want to do something that I control, that I want to do, right? Not something that some corporate person decides would be marketable and profitable. Which kind of leads me to another point, right, that I learned from this, is like, it's important to, you know, to go through these maybe non-passion projects to be able to get to the point where you're in a position to work on your own passion project. And one of the last points also I want to make about what I learned about AAA is the getting contacts. So like, you work with so many people to be able to get contacts where in the future either you were going to end up working with. We're 4 partners on my studio. All 4 of us used to work in the exact same pod, right next to each other at Visceral about 5 years ago, and we all ended up working together, right? So that's just invaluable stuff that you get by working. And you guys are lucky. You have, like, this type of setup you guys have is great. I'm glad to see it, because I've never been part of a community like this, or like not for games anyways. And it's cool to see that you guys are building this kind of contacts through other means. And then when you have questions, maybe this guy has more experience with this, or this girl knows about this, and then you can kind of help each other and push each other to get that same kind of knowledge, right? So anyways, just as I kind of touched a little bit on the comparisons between, you know, AAA and indie. One thing I mentioned was obviously the team size. It's such a big team that you end up really just working on a more focused area of the game, right? You can't be touching as much. You have a more specific role, which in itself can be very good, because then you get really good at doing that specific role. And if you do it for long enough, you're able to change your focus over time, and you become like a little bit of an expert in a lot of things. And then versus now, I just do everything from tools programming on Unity, or like to gameplay, to AI, to more like, you know, like more technical art almost, which I had never done before. And so that's a big difference there. I would say personally now that I built up knowledge for, you know, different focused area of gameplay or game dev in general. I'm able to expand that to like all the other parts of game development. And I love it. I love being able to touch everything. We hired an engineering contractor to help us out program it. And it was a little bit painful for me to be able to say, this is my baby, and someone else is gonna be putting his dirty hands on it. But you know, like it's very rewarding, and I think it's something that is very exciting about indie, and I've been loving the last 2 years because of that. One thing I'd say that I miss a lot also is the social aspect, especially because we're all remote. So I'm in Montreal, someone in Denver, someone in Seattle, someone in San Francisco. Obviously, we meet almost every day like this, but the social aspect of like kind of going to work and meeting people is something I miss. Again, you guys with this kind of community are alleviating that type of thing, especially when it goes back to being purely virtual, hopefully at some point. You get to talk to people and go, hey, I'm going to, you know, see people, and then that are in the same type of boat, right? That's the thing about making games. At some point, you're like, it's a lot. It's a big endeavor, and to feel like you're not alone in this can be is sometimes very, very needed. The one thing I'd say that pushed me the most, there are two things that pushed me the most to get away from AAA and start my own indie experiences, the creative leeway. So that's something, again, I touched earlier with working maybe on projects that are not your passion projects. You may, you know, I always love the work environment, love the people I work with. And I love the game I work on, but it wasn't necessarily like, hey, this is what I want to do, you know, a Battlefront, Star Wars, or whatever. That's not. And then the one big thing about it is you don't have as much say. You're a small cog in the machine to create this massive project. And you might have ideas, and you still do have ideas that can eventually be put in the game, but the overall setup of the game, the overall creative direction is very much tailored to what is marketable, what is profitable, especially in a company like EA, where, you know, it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, what are the shareholders going to think of this, right? It's like, is this going to put value into the company? And it's not necessarily like, it's not something that would necessarily like turn me off entirely from doing it forever, but given the option, I'd rather be able to say, hey, we want to do this because we feel like it's going to make the game great. And then it comes from us and we're kind of driving everything, right? That for me was a huge thing, right? At the end of the day, we're still making a game that we hope will allow us to live. So we're still making decisions based on like, hey, do we feel like people are going to play this? Not just like, hey, I feel like like this is, I love this, so fuck everything else. Like we still want to make sure that this is a game people will play, and then we'll be able to market it in some extent, right? But the focus has changed a lot, right? In the balance of those two things. And then the other thing that is a very personal thing, maybe that pushed me to go indie was that it was remote, and there are some drawbacks to it, but there are also like positives. I'll talk a lot about. That's kind of the second part. I'll talk about more the remote aspect of it and how it's been working for us, maybe, and also what I like about it. So the first thing is what you need to understand is, for me, I quit EA twice already. I quit and came back and quit and came back. And the reason is I wanted to travel. When I was in California, I wanted to travel. So I saved my money and I did a whole 1-year trip around the world. And then I came back to Montreal, and I was trying to find ways to keep doing that while working. And I wasn't, I did the whole angel list thing, trying to go freelance, but I couldn't find projects that I was into. And I decided to, at that time, to go back to EA at the new studio here, Motive, that was working on Battlefront at the time. Even though that's not exactly what I wanted, it was essential for me to do that step so that the timing was right. Because sometimes, like you have to wait for the right opportunity to kind of jump and go all in with. And that was 2.5 years ago when everything kind of fell into place after I had gone back to doing AAA for a while. Anyways, all this to say that like a big thing for me about remote was that I was able to work from wherever, right? Like I was able to get my setup here with a laptop and kind of travel or live wherever using that setup. Obviously, remote comes with some challenges. We've been doing this now 2 years fully remote. We've seen each other once a year, like in person, the whole team, which should be a lot more. Obviously, it's tough with budget, managing that money-wise. So yeah, like I said, we meet virtually like this pretty much every day. I would say that one hard thing to do remote is to establish relationships, right? Like you have the personal relationships you're trying to maintain. We were lucky enough that we had all worked together. We were really good friends, all four of us. And then that made it easier to maintain because we didn't have to actually like start a relationship. And I think that's something that's pretty important if you're going to go fully remote, is to at least have established relationships with one or two of the people you work with, because then you already have, you know how you interact with them, you already know how to talk to them. And making games, sometimes it's a creative environment. People disagree. People, things can be a little bit spicy, and it's important to be able to tell things straight to that person. And when you only have this virtual relationship and you don't know them in person, that can be hard. So I would say if any of you are thinking about doing a full remote, I'd say if you don't know them already, at least get to know them in person to some extent, to facilitate the relationship, the virtual relationship that you're gonna mostly have after, right? Like I said, daily meetings are important. Doing this just sometimes, even if you don't have anything to share, just to get on there. We try to do sometimes even just like play test with someone plays and everyone's on. And even if you're kind of working at the same time, sometimes you're just talking to each other and just doing that. We started now just playing games together every now and then, just to get the friendly, we're going out for a beer after type thing, where like it's not just professional. It's not just we're making a game together, because especially towards the end it can get very, very intense and the pressure can be a lot. One of the hardest things that we've had to deal with is we hired one of my friends that I used to work with in California. He's Indian. He was in India, and we hired him with a huge time difference that it had. That was really difficult, especially when we had to ramp him up When, you know, my start of the day was his end of the day, and we had maybe a 2-hour, you know, overlap. That was extremely hard, and I think that's something that we were going to try to limit as much as possible, especially for new hires, to have at least, you know, like in North America, for example, or in your case, maybe more Europe to Middle East, where you have like only a few hours difference. It's much more manageable. Where when it's on the other side of the world, totally different story, and it can be very frustrating for everyone. And then, like I said, the main advantage for me was the ability to go work anywhere. I know this is a little bit impossible to think about in these times, but for me that was a long-term objective. So maybe I don't know if for you guys it is too. It seems like we have a few international people in here. The idea of being able to work anywhere, I worked several years to be able to get there, right? And to make it sustainable, because that's the other thing. And we started this, we didn't make money for a whole year, right? You're kind of waiting there. And that's where I went to live in Peru for eight months, which was great in terms of, for me, just being able to experience living somewhere different, somewhere where like the routine is different, where, you know, everything's different. And one actual advantage that came from this is that was, like I said, during a time where I was purely living on my savings. And turns out that living in Peru is much cheaper than living in, especially San Francisco or even Montreal. And that's something that, that, you know, it's possible to use as a way to save money. I don't know how expensive it is to live in Jerusalem, but I expect it to be still more expensive than most places in South America, which, by the way, is where the place where I met the most Israelis is in Peru. It's everywhere, and made a lot of friends. I hiked Machu Picchu with good Israeli friends. It's great. Anyway, so that's something that for me had been driving me a long time to get there. It's a huge advantage that I find, and I know a lot of people. It's hard, like we were talking just about before with some of you guys about how it's hard to maybe find the time and money to do it. And it's true, it is. If you're able to mix both of what you want to work on and you know, your objectives of maybe traveling or seeing the world, if you're able to mix both of those, for me that can actually work pretty well, given the situation that a lot of us can work from laptops. You know, if you work with Unity or something, like, it's not that you can buy a laptop that handles that. Yeah, so that for me is kind of like one of the best advantages of working remote. I think it's something that we're seeing now a lot of people are forced to do. And for us, it's been like, we're at 100%. We're still working, like nothing happened. We don't get out as much, but we're still like working a lot. So I think a lot of people will keep that routine maybe of the remote. I think it's a positive change. I think it's great. Ideally, again, if you're able to meet them in person, it's still very valuable to be able to maintain those in real world type of relationship. Anyways, that's kind of my whole ramble of my story / advantages of working remote. I'm sure you guys maybe, I don't know if you guys have questions. I'd rather just maybe create more of a conversation at this point about the AAA or remote or indie experience, whatever you guys have questions, or even just technical stuff, maybe it can help out.
Yeah, that's how I saw this going as well. More of a conversation.
Yeah.
And I can start it off. I have questions. I have questions, plenty of them. I don't even know which one to start with, but just the last one I remember was because you said that the first year you guys, were making money. The game, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't out yet. Is it on early access? How have you guys changed that?
It's not on early access. It's the Epic Game exclusive, which is how we got financing. It's not out. We're aiming for a launch at the end of this year. If everything goes well, I think so far we're going that direction. So yeah, it's not out yet. We might do early access. We don't think so. We want to, if we're going to support this game after, but like we want to ship a game that's like, this is ready, and we're going to add on to it, but we want to ship a game that's ready. Which we've thought about early access. It's an idea. It's just, I like both. Sometimes I play early access games, it feels like they're finished. Sometimes I play them, it feels like they're not. So it's a bit weird. It's kind of like everyone has their own definition of what early access is. So if you put early access as a tag, people are like, I didn't know what to expect. So we'd rather put it out there, people know what to expect as a finished game with more things to come.
Yeah, gotcha. Sorry, that question was unrelated to your main points. But about remote work, I'll just ask one more and then I'll let other people. But so most of us are now working remote, if at all, and like you don't have a game dev community, so your main social like game dev circle is the people that you work with right now. Are there other channels that you found useful when working remotely versus working at a big AAA company, such as Reddit or other places on the internet that you that you found like people to talk to about stuff?
So definitely, like my main social interaction with game devs is the team that we have. I have 1.5 other engineers in there, which is always good when I have big decisions to make. I can kind of like talk to them about it. I have access to also a Slack channel that one of my friends got me in with. It's just like game coders. I have to say I did not really use that as much as I thought I would. I did use obviously online resources a lot, and initially we started this game on Unreal, and the main reason we switched was because of we switched to Unity. I mean, it was because we did have more resources. There's a bigger community, it was easier to find answers to our questions. You get really good, I guess, as going online. I wish I had this type of community. I'm not really good at doing that. Some of my partners do. They have access to maybe a bigger network. I'm more of an imposter in the industry, where like I quit travel and I was like, kind of all over the place. So I come back to it. I'm like kind of still setting my bearing.
Guys, you see, imposter syndrome, it's real. Everyone experiences it. We've talked about it before.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, thank you. So who else has questions? Raise your hands.
No questions.
No way. I don't believe you guys.
I think Ben's trying to talk, but we can't hear Ben.
Can't hear you.
Seems like a great question, though.
Maybe he can write in the chat.
Yeah, I do. Yes.
No, we just lost him completely.
Yeah, he's like, his video came out. Maybe he's trying to say something. But yeah, maybe to expand on your last question there, it's pretty daunting, like how many decisions I've had to make, and just think like, I don't know. I hope that works out. And then you go online, but then does it apply entirely to my thing? The whole how to structure the game. It's like, and now I would do it somewhat differently, but there's a lot of this that like I said, it came from previous experience that if I I would have made more mistakes. Now I can live with the mistakes I've made, because you always make mistakes, but at least now it's more manageable, and I think we can ship the game with this. But obviously it's like you need to do a lot of research online of like how to organize things. Every time you have an issue, you go online and see how can you apply this to your own situation.
Yeah. Ben, do you want to try again?
I have a question too. Someone in the chat.
Yeah, I'll read it for you. What do you think is super important for a beginner in sound and graphic design field? And technically, what can help me to improve myself in the workflow with other developers?
That's an interesting question. Okay,
Do
so
you guys have a sound designer full time on Airborne Kingdom?
we have an audio guy that makes the soundtrack and sound effects, who is a very similar situation. I had to show him how to even open Unity just last Friday. So you know, for me, like obviously the beginner is like just do an own project. If you just want to do sound graphic designer, it's maybe to use a previous template or an existing game and kind of like put your stuff in there. So you don't have to do the technical aspect of it, but just kind of how would you make it differently? How would you add it to it? So the important part for me is like when I create something for an artist or audio or graphic, I set up the hooks, right? So I set up everything up so that it's hooked up properly with the logic and everything, and then they just have to kind of slot their pieces in. But they need to know where these slots are and how to manage that, right? So if you're a beginner in that field, and it's just understanding how everything is structured. If you work with Unity, Unreal, most engines will have a similar workflow, and then you'll just have to like kind of adapt to each engine. But just start with one engine and kind of understand how the structure works in the editor. How do you get the flow working from your either sound or graphic tools into the editor, and how can you like interface really with what is given to you by the engineer or whatever, right? So that's the technical part of an artist that I kind of like expect or desire, so that it makes my job easier as the one that will actually like set everything up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hey, first of all, thanks very much. I wanted to just ask about something. My internet cut out like for about 5 minutes at the beginning there. So I hope I'm not going to ask you to repeat something you already said, but you were talking about your experience in AAA and how, you know, you think at the beginning it's just about sort of gaining that experience and, you know, just getting that tool set. And, you know, particularly here, there aren't any real AAA studios here that you can do that in. And, you know, my personal experience as an artist of, you know, trying to get even the really entry level sort of internship sort of things overseas is like really, really difficult. So I know that you have a lot of experience sort of working remote. Do you have any like advice for people who, you know, they're just starting out their journey. They're not necessarily that fresh out of school. They have a little bit of experience, but they don't have the, you know, nose to the grindstone sort of working in a big studio or in a studio at all. And sort of what kind of path they can take if they don't have those options at their disposal. Like, I know that there isn't like a clear-cut answer to that, but just like your opinion on what they can do.
Right. I mean, I understand your question. It's very difficult because unfortunately you know, where you are very like geographically in the world can have a big impact. You know, in my case, I was lucky to have a school that was in North America that did internships and it kind of like got me in. But like, if I go through maybe my history of internships, like I did 7 of them, 4 months each, and it started really basic, you know, and not doing games. That was for a more technical aspect of it. When I went to EA as interns, and I would talk to other like interns that were maybe in art. The art part is incredibly tough. Like I don't know if I can give you an answer that you don't know already, but to kind of get, you know, you want to stand out in a way. And then the online presence is the one thing that I saw that actually gave an edge to anyone. Is just you show, you know, the creating portfolio online presence, maybe in social media, potentially even like, you know, like your portfolio maybe not just purely artistic, but like art in games so that they can be applied to games. That's if you want to get like internships into these type of company, that like AAA companies. I would say, although that unless that's exactly your goal, if your goal is just to get the experience and then going to do an internship is part of you getting that experience, I do believe that there are ways to get experience otherwise. Like it's not going to be the same process, but there are ways to get. And again, this type of community is the exact thing. Like it's very similar in a way to the community we have at, let's say, at AAA, where like there's a bunch of different people. There's very beginner. Like I came in like I didn't know I hadn't made games at all, and then but you have the people that have been working there for 5-10 years and could kind of coach me and mentor me, right? So that's the kind of experience that you want to get, and that I was able to get as an intern, and you can get using this type of network here that you have. But yeah, to go back maybe to the original question of like specifically trying to get an internship overseas or wherever they have like AAA studios, it's a very I think it's a very linear path. You know, like it's like if you can get your foot in the door in a company that you know is a bigger, slightly bigger company, and then that maybe leads you to like another one where you can get your step in the door, maybe like something more accessible to Israel, for example, in this case, where like it's closer to Israel, but then they have like, they're like a subsidiary maybe or a bigger company, and then you get in there. That's unfortunately how they work. It's very expensive for these companies to otherwise go out of their immediate network in North America, for example. They just don't have that kind of visibility into the, you know, the other parts of the world. So that's kind of the only thing I could suggest is try to like slowly work your way. I know maybe not like an easy answer or anything. Unfortunately, I also don't have the experience of like coming into this industry from Israel or a smaller market in video games.
Right, I figured it wouldn't be like an easy thing. I just wanted to sort of what you think. It was more
right. Yeah. Hope I could help with that answer. We have more questions to chat here.
I'll read it for you. I was wondering if you could talk about your experience of working with game designers. What contact did you have with them at EA, and who covers game design in your team now?
Well, yes, game designers is the people I work with the most, almost, especially at EA at Hardline. I was one of the only engineers on the multiplayer side, which is kind of funny to think about. But I worked a lot with the game designer, the weapons designer, game designer, vehicle designer. They had a ton of designers there. My experience with them is like there's different, and also level designers, obviously. The experience, it varies a lot. There's people that are very like high level, like here are my ideas, and I see the whole game as like this more an idea driven thing. There are designers that are really into the editor and a little bit more tech savvy, if you will. I mean, if you want my experience with that relationship, obviously, like if I can work with a designer that can just grasp a little bit more of the technical side, then obviously the interaction, the communication is it's more direct, right? Otherwise, I have to kind of abstract a lot of things that I do, and whether like a lot of the design decisions, they come as high level things, and then when I go and program them, I start thinking about so many different things that he might not have thought of because of either, hey, like this will be shaped that way, so maybe we want to think of design that way, or hey, here's what we already have. It would take way too much time to do it otherwise. What do you think we adapt accordingly, right? So if I can have this type of conversation with a designer, it's much easier. In general, designers at EA would be coached at a certain level to be familiar with the engine in a way that I can interface with them more easier. Right now, the design guy, the designer in our team, his name is Ben. He was also a programmer before. He became designer at EA, and now he's doing the design, and he gets all of the background, like the more technical part. So it's very easy. It's very easy, and also we're very good friends, so it's always better. I don't know if I answered your question. It was a little bit vague, like my experience with them. That's kind of my experience. I don't know if you have more like pointy questions as to like, how did that go? How did we, what would I recommend a designer to do? What would I recommend a programmer to do to interact with game designers? I don't know if one or the other would be more what you're looking for.
It's interesting, like to me, to hear usually about designers on big teams versus small teams, because it's such a different role. Like a programmer is a programmer, kind of, right? Obviously, different levels of experience in different areas of expertise. But a designer, on someone who is professional at designing at a big company or on a big game, often there isn't something for him to as much for him to do on a smaller team.
For sure.
Right.
That's the other thing too. It's not as academic, like as programming. You need a lot of like, you need to know how these things work. There's a lot more yes or no questions. Versus designers, it's like, hope they like it kind of thing. Like it's sometimes it's a little bit of a roll of the dice, and like this works. The games that worked that the game compiled oftentimes like, fuck, this was kind of an idea we just threw out there, right? And everyone can be a designer, but they might not be good, right? Like whereas programming, you need to know like basic things, otherwise you can't even do anything, right? So that's the difficulty with the designers, and that's what's so more of an intangible of what makes them good is like they can anticipate stuff. On a day-to-day, I would say maybe now I think more about it, like what I appreciate more about it is, first of all, the ability to take criticism, to not take their things too personally when people of any type of discipline, including programmers, tell them like, hey, how about this? Also to be ready to, things will change, to not get stuck on something, and then allow the other parts of the game to shape design to some extent. Because there's a lot of limitations, especially with engineering or art, like how much content can art provide to support this design? How much work is it for engineering to do something, right? Like it's not like if it's a great design, but like it takes so long to do it technically, then you're sacrificing maybe other parts of the design, and all the game overall suffers for it. So that's very important. Also being ready for the most important part of the development. It's something that we did a lot at Battlefield on a hardline is quick iterations, right? Like just throw something out there, try it. Well, how can we improve? What can we change? Is it good or not? We had daily playtests at our line where like we did something, and I would be in those meetings like, okay, let's try this. And I would do something real quickly the day after the next day or the day after we tried it, and then started rating and getting that in. Obviously with a bigger team, it's easier. Now we're struggling to have the same kind of iteration time, but it's the most important part. We need to be able to iterate, and not just like we have an idea, we put it in, and we're done with it. So like just getting that in, and then a designer should have different tiers for the design so that we know, okay, we start with this, and that allows us to vet the basic part of this idea, and if it's good, then we have branches to where to go next, or even to just cut it if it's not good.
Cool. Ben says thanks a lot, and follows up with a question of about technical knowledge. What technical knowledge would you expect from a designer, and would you recommend a designer who wants to step into AAA to put focus on? Wait, sorry. What technology do you expect, and what would you recommend a designer to focus on if he wants to step into AAA?
So, I mean, that's a huge advantage. You can be a great designer, and maybe they'll like you, and then you'll be good enough if you don't have as much technical knowledge. But if you're trying to stand out, it's so good because you're more independent. You, like I said, the way you interface and talk to engineers changes in a way that is much easier for the engineers, and so they can. It just becomes more. You talk the same language. If you can talk the same language, then it's much easier. If I have to like abstract things out in a way it's like, hope he understands, then I'm dumbing down what I'm doing so that we can talk together. And I don't mean to say like in an offensive way, just like we don't talk the same language, right? if you get, like, it's a bit related to the question I answered before for the graphic and sound designer. It's like, the first part is understanding how things are organized and structured in the editor, right? There's still a very technical part of what's in the editor. For example, in Unity, you have these components and they all have different fields. If you can understand how that is given to you from the engineer, for example, the engineer gives you fields and then they do something in there and they do some logic based on like the data, whatever is in there, how these components interact with each other. And that can be very much tied to how it's set up in that specific project. But overall, it's like, how is this all structured behind the hood without necessarily knowing how to code, just to understand how it's like I said, it's organized and how it translates into Unity, so you understand very well the interface that is given to you in Unity, these components and the game objects and all this stuff and how it works. That is huge. That's already like a huge thing. And that's kind of what, when I talked to designers at EA that were like more tech savvy, I didn't mean like they knew how to code. It's just that they understood all of these things. At EA, we use Frostbite, which is much more like Unreal with the blueprints and kind of this visual programming type thing. That's even more like, you can do everything with this if you wanted to, right? Like it's kind of a programming language in itself. So if you understand very well how this works, it's important. To get there, maybe like if you can have like a programmer coach you into like, hey, this is high level how it works in code, and that's why it works this way in whatever editor you use, then you will have an understanding of what you're seeing. And I'll just like know, oh, I do this and this happens. I want to understand why it works that way. That can be a huge edge for any designer for sure.
Yeah, that's great advice. Here's another question. There's the last question from Ben, and then we'll let other people ask. But I'm also curious about what prototyping practices do you see at EA? Is there a prototype team there? You know, how do?
Right. There is, like at the beginning of the project, there's some people like at Motive here, we had a new project that was coming along. They did prototyping in Unity. Like they have Unity license just for prototyping because Frostbite is notorious for how freaking painful it is to iterate on. It's really tough. Like when I went from Frostbite to Unity, it was like, wow, this is amazing. It's great. So there was when they start the project, they kind of just prototype that way. At a more higher level, they used to be what they call the chief creative officer's OCCO, like whatever, the office of the chief creative officer, the place where they would just like have a bunch of interns just try stuff with the new technology. I think they shut it off now. I don't think it's still there, but that's more like, hey, they just try a bunch of stuff. That is at EA one of the companies that is the least prone to doing, kind of innovating. They kind of just take a formula and milk it. So I'm sure other companies have more of that type of like, kind of like, hey, as a company, let's see where we can be in 5 years. But yeah, like on a project, yeah, you have a prototype team, kind of works things out. Okay, this is what we got. Okay, and then they move to Frostbite, and then they still prototype to some extent. And through the project, like the iteration part is kind of prototyping it at a more smaller scale. So yeah, like it's important. It's very important. I think we skipped a question. Did you ever develop a game by yourself? No, I haven't. I don't know that I could. Some people can, like my partner Ben. He did the Case of Distrust game. He did by himself. 1 year in Southeast Asia, 1 year in the States, 1.5 years in the States. It took him 2.5 years to do this by himself. And I applaud him because it's very tough mentally, but it's possible. It's possible, and it's important to keep the scope small. So.
What is scope even?
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else want to ask something? Amit.
Sure.
Amit.
Hi, Fred. Actually, I'm already working with a game studio here in Israel called Jelly Button Games.
Nice.
And during, due to the recent world events, we moved to working remotely even though we're several kilometers from each other, most of us. So I have a practical question, like what tools, power tools, do you recommend for programmers to work with other teams, like art people, like designers, 3D artists, etc., that are not as familiar with Git and not as flexible with tech tools as other programmers? And especially with game designers and just in general, people you need to be in the room with the game and a board,
Right.
and some panels.
So, so what we use the most is a simple, just day to day for meetings is Google Meet. We have the Google Suite thing with our everything, and they have the Google Meet with it, which allows you to share screen. When I need to get in there because it's too painful to watch him do what I tell him to do, I use TeamViewer, which you can get for free, maybe at a small price for commercial license, which allows you to go in there and control their computer. When it comes down to like the board, my designer has a board. He has a board there, and then we can see what he writes. But it's one thing we miss the most, I must say, and that's where like it's a bit of a challenge. There are solutions out there. I mean, OneNote, it's kind of bad, but there's a way to like share like what everyone's writing. We use OneNote for design. But yeah, the TeamViewer, if I can just control what he's saying and then I can share my screen to show him like, hey, this is what I'm doing. You can share your screen also just to like do more design driven conversations. I need more visual support. Then yeah, but those are the tools we use the most. Obviously Slack is, yeah, Slack and is everywhere. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, thank you. We have time for one last question if anyone has. That's what I thought.
Just to want to say, like, if you guys have more, I'm on the Discord, right? I'm around, like, I'm not going to read every channel all the time, but like, if you have questions, just at me, whether it's technical or whatever question you have, like, I'm happy to answer them to the end.
Awesome, thank you. I wanted to, so we are going to end this recording and the call now, but we are all on the Discord and can kind of have a more casual conversation there. Tonight, you know, we can continue voice. I'm not, Fred isn't required, but if he wants to, he's welcome. And I just wanted to say personally, thank you to Fred, because like, we really appreciate you going to talk to us. I know it's not easy to, you know, talk about yourself for, you know, minutes on end,
yeah,
with everyone on mute. But it's really, really valuable for us to hear that side. Like, it's an experience that a lot of us don't come in contact with on a day-to-day. We don't have that industry here, and it just feels, you know, it's almost like, you know, this virus and everything has broken down the global walls, but I think it's a really valuable experience to get to talk to you and hear what you've learned and what you've done in the industry. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys are welcome. Like, for me, this is what I like to do, like, to meet people from around. Like, I like to travel, and if we can share knowledge that is not accessible one side or the other, I think that's just the power of technology and the power of just like being open to the rest of the world. So like, I'm happy to share this with you guys.
Yeah, that's really awesome. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. See you on Discord.
Woo! Woo!
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Gracias.
De nada.
Nada. Ahora podemos hablar todo en español. Ya es permitido.
Sí.